The hammer blows echoed across the Kansas prairie like gunshots. 3 strikes, and the foreclosure notice hung on Clara Henshaw's door, white paper bright against weathered wood. Silas Drummond stepped back, silver pocket watch chiming noon in his palm. 60 days to settle your mortgage debt of $240, Mrs. Henshaw, or forfeit the property to Broken Spoke Bank and Trust. Clara stood in the doorway, knuckles white against the frame. Behind her, through the window, her father's homestead patent certificate caught the light, presidential seal and all. In the garden, Ruth and Jacob had stopped their work, dirt on their hands, faces too serious for children. Always a shame, Drummond said, tipping his hat, when folks can't manage what they're given. The neighbors in the near fields had turned away. Not a soul met her eyes. Clara watched his buggy disappear in dust devils, then turned to the well. Empty. Bone dry for 3 months now. The sound of hooves came fast from the east. The man hit the ground hard, tumbling from his horse like a sack of grain. The animal kept running, saddle empty, reins dragging. Clara ran. Her boots kicked up dust from the yard as she crossed to where he'd fallen, right at the edge of her dry well. Blood darkened his shirt, soaked through on the left side, spreading. "Mama!" Ruth's voice, sharp with fear. "Stay back!" Clara knelt, pressing her hand to the wound. The man groaned, eyes fluttering. 45, maybe. Good clothes, despite the blood and dirt. His face was weathered but not rough. A man used to thinking more than laboring. Something metallic clinked against stone. A brass compass had fallen from his coat, catching the sunlight like a mirror. Clara picked it up, felt its weight. Engraved on the back, U.S. Railway Survey Commission, Topeka office. Property of E. Cole, licensed surveyor. Jacob, fetch the last bucket from the root cellar. Her voice stayed steady, though her heart hammered. Ruth, get my herb box. Mama. Ruth's hand touched her shoulder. That's all the water we have. For the wheat? Now. The children ran. Clara tore the man's shirt open. Bullet wound, clean through the side. She'd seen worse during the war years when their farm had been a makeshift hospital. The bleeding was bad, but not fatal if she worked fast. Jacob returned, breathing hard, bucket sloshing. Clara took it, lifted the ladle, and poured cool water over the wound. The man's eyes snapped open, bright blue, intelligent, startling in their clarity. "The maps!" he gasped. "Drummond moved!" His eyes rolled back, unconscious again. "Get him inside!" Clara grabbed his shoulders, and Ruth took his boots. They dragged him across the threshold into the cabin's dim coolness. The packed earth floor was smooth under their feet, worn by years of her family's living. Doc Abernathy arrived within the hour, his buggy rattling into the yard. The old physician had delivered both her children, set her husband's broken arm twice, and closed Thomas's eyes after the thresher took him. Heard there was trouble. He knelt beside the stranger, fingers probing the wound with practiced efficiency. The smell of carbolic and tobacco clung to his vest. Bullet passed clean through. Lucky man. He said something about Drummond. Clara ground herbs in her mortar, yarrow for bleeding, comfrey for healing. The familiar rhythm steadied her hands. And maps. Doc's eyes narrowed. Did he now? The stranger muttered in fever, tossing his head. Railway Commission? Survey fraud. Have to tell someone? Ruth moved closer, the brass compass in her palm. She turned it over, reading the inscription aloud. U.S. Railway Survey Commission. Mama, he's a government surveyor. Doc Abernathy sat back on his heels, something like satisfaction crossing his weathered face. Well, that changes things, doesn't it? Changes what? Clara pressed her poultice to the wound, wrapping it with clean muslin torn from her last good sheet. Drummond's been buying up mortgages all over the county, foreclosing on good families. Nobody's been able to prove anything improper, but... Doc stood, dusting his knees. A federal railway surveyor doesn't get shot by accident, Clara. Not out here. Through the window, the afternoon sun slanted across empty fields. The wheat should have been knee-high by now. Instead, brown stubble stretched toward the horizon, dying for lack of water. He'll need watching through the night. Doc collected his bag. Fever will spike. Keep him cool. Keep that wound clean. And Clara, maybe don't mention to anyone that he's here. Not yet. After he left, Clara sat beside the stranger's makeshift bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. His face had gone pale under the prairie tan, but his breathing stayed steady. Ruth appeared at her elbow, holding the compass. It's real, Mama. See? She pointed to a tiny seal embossed near the hinge. Federal commission mark? Teacher showed us one in a book. What's a surveyor doing out here? Jacob squatted by the door, his father's whittling knife in his hands. Always needed something to do with his fingers when he was thinking. Surveying, I reckon. But Clara's mind turned over the stranger's fever words. Drummond moved. Moved what? Survey markers? Property lines? The well had gone dry 3 years back, right after Thomas died. She'd thought it was drought, bad luck, God's testing. But what if... Mama, Ruth's voice pulled her back. Are we going to be all right? Clara looked at her daughter's face. Too thin, too worried. 14 years old and already carrying the weight of a woman grown. Behind her, Jacob watched with his father's eyes, steady, determined, afraid to show fear. Yes. She said it like a promise, like an oath. We're going to be all right. The stranger's eyes fluttered open again, unfocused with fever. His lips moved, barely a whisper. Clara leaned close, smelling sweat and blood and dust. The maps, he breathed. In my saddlebag. Don't let him... His hand caught hers, grip surprisingly strong. Don't let him take it. The general store smelled of coffee beans and leather, pickle brine and tobacco. Clara walked the aisles with Ruth beside her, counting coins in her palm. 23 cents, enough for cornmeal and maybe a half-pound of lard. Mrs. Yates stood behind the counter, wiping it with a rag that had seen better days. Her eyes flicked to Clara, then away. At the back of the store, 2 farmers stopped their conversation mid-sentence. The silence pressed like a hand over her mouth. Morning, Mrs. Yates. Clara set her basket on the counter. Mrs. Henshaw. The storekeeper's wife kept wiping, circular motions that went nowhere. Heard about your notice. News travels. It does. Mrs. Yates finally met her eyes. Something moved in her expression. Pity, shame, fear, all mixed together. She reached under the counter, pulled out a 5-pound sack of flour. For the children, she said quietly. No charge. Clara's throat tightened. I can't. You can. Mrs. Yates pressed it into her hands. We all got to look out for each other, even when... She trailed off, glancing toward the window. Even when we're too afraid to do it publicly, Clara finished in her mind. Outside on the church steps, Preacher Dalton caught her arm. His grip was gentle but urgent, the smell of pipe tobacco on his coat. Sister Clara, his voice dropped low. We're praying for you. You know that. I appreciate it, Preacher. But, he glanced over his shoulder, Drummond owns half this town's mortgages. The mercantile, the blacksmith, even the livery. Folks are afraid if they help you, they'll be next. Ruth's hand found Clara's, squeezed hard. I understand. Clara did too. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. If there was anything I could do, there isn't. She said it without bitterness. Facts were facts. Come on, Ruth. They turned toward home. Across the square, Silas Drummond emerged from the courthouse, arm draped across Judge Harlan's shoulders. Both men laughed at something, the sound carrying clear in the morning air. Drummond's pocket watch caught the sun as he checked it, snapped it shut. Judge Harlan was his brother-in-law. Clara had forgotten that detail until just now, or maybe she'd never let herself think about what it meant. Ruth pulled her toward the courthouse steps. Mama, we have to try. The petition sat in Clara's other hand, carefully written in Ruth's neat script. Request for hearing on irregular mortgage interest calculations. Doc Abernathy had helped with the legal language. They had the numbers, the dates, the proof that something wasn't right about how her debt had grown. The courthouse smelled of old wood and tobacco spit. A brass spittoon sat beside the door, flies buzzing around its rim. Judge Harlan sat behind his desk, reading spectacles perched on his nose. Clara laid the petition in front of him. Your Honor, I'm requesting a hearing on my mortgage terms, the interest calculations, insufficient grounds. He didn't look up from the paper he was already reading. But if you just look at the numbers, Mrs. Henshaw. Now he looked at her, over the top of his spectacles. The bank's terms were clear when you signed. I see no irregularity here. You haven't even examined. Case dismissed. He picked up her petition, dropped it into the waste bin beside his desk. The thump of paper hitting wood was final as a judge's gavel. Ruth stepped forward. Sir, the compound interest was applied without... Young lady. Judge Harlan's voice sharpened. Your mother's financial difficulties don't give you leave to lecture your betters. Heat flooded Clara's face. Shame warred with rage, both useless, both overwhelming. From the back of the room came a low chuckle. Drummond leaned against the wall, arms crossed, that same satisfied smile on his face. He touched 2 fingers to his hat brim in mock salute. The court clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, waited until they reached the door before he spoke. His whisper barely carried. "He controls everything, ma'am. Judge, sheriff, half the county board. Best pack your things." Outside, Ruth's hands shook as she clutched her schoolbooks. "It's not fair." "No." Clara stared at the dusty street, at the people passing who wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's not." "Mama." Ruth's voice changed, steadied. She pulled a ledger book from beneath her arithmetic primer. "Teacher let me borrow this?" She said, "If I wanted to understand banking law, I should start with compound interest." Clara took the book. The pages were dense with numbers, formulas, legal citations. "I've been studying." Ruth opened to a marked page, her finger tracing a column of figures. "Our mortgage. Look at the interest rates here, and here, and here. They're different, Mama. He changed them. 3 times in 2 years. The numbers swam before Clara's eyes. She'd always left the figuring to Thomas, then tried to make sense of it herself after he died. But Ruth had her grandfather's mind for mathematics. "He's been cheating us." Ruth's voice was quiet but certain. "The law says compound interest has to be agreed upon in writing at the start. These changes, they're not legal." Clara's heart hammered. "Can you prove it?" "I already did." Ruth pulled out a folded paper covered in her careful calculations. "We've overpaid by $87. He owes us money, Mama." The words hung in the afternoon heat. Down the street, a door slammed, a dog barked. Life going on like the world hadn't just shifted under Clara's feet. "We need to get home." Clara took Ruth's hand. "There's something the stranger said about maps." They walked quickly, flour sack bumping against Clara's hip. At the edge of town, Jacob met them running, face flushed. "Mama, he's awake, really awake, and he's asking for his saddlebag." Inside the cabin, Ezra Cole sat propped against the wall, pale but clear-eyed. His gaze went to Clara, sharp and assessing. "You saved my life, ma'am. I'm obliged." "You said something about maps, about Drummond." "I did." He looked at the children, then back at Clara. "How much do you trust your young ones?" "With my life." "Good." He nodded toward his saddlebag, hanging on the peg by the door. "Bring it here. There's something inside you need to see." Jacob brought the saddlebag, leather still dusty from the road. Ezra unbuckled it with careful fingers, his side clearly paining him. The bag's interior smelled of oiled canvas and old paper. He pulled out a rolled document, bound with string and sealed with red wax. The seal showed an eagle and locomotive, official, unmistakable. "I'm a Federal Railway surveyor," Ezra said, untying the string. "Sent here 6 weeks ago to investigate fraud complaints. Land disputes, water rights, property lines that don't match territorial records." He spread the map across the floor, specifically complaints about Silas Drummond. Clara knelt beside him. The map showed Broken Spoke and the surrounding homesteads in careful detail. Property lines drawn in India ink, creek beds in blue, section markers in red. Ezra's finger traced a blue line. "Willow Creek. According to Territorial Survey from 1863, it ran here, right through the center of your property." His finger moved. "But look at this survey from 1885. The creek's been diverted north by half a mile." That's when our well went dry." Clara's voice came out hollow. 3 years ago. "Not drought." Ezra tapped the map. "Engineering. Someone dammed the creek upstream, cut a new channel, dried up every well on the south properties, made the north properties, Drummond's properties, worth twice as much. Water rights in Kansas territory are everything." Ruth leaned close, studying the map. "He stole our water." "He did." Ezra rolled to another map, this one showing the original 1863 homestead survey. "These are the Federal Land Office records. Your father's claim, Mrs. Henshaw. Homestead Patent 1863-42. The boundary stones should be here, here, and here." He pointed to 3 marks. "But when I surveyed last month, the northern stones had been moved, by about 50 yards. "Making our property smaller," Clara said. "And his larger." Ezra's jaw tightened. "I've documented 11 families he's done this to. Forge new boundary markers, divert water, manipulate mortgage terms, then foreclose when they can't pay. He's built an empire on fraud." The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing close. Clara's breath came short. Why didn't anyone stop him? Because he owns the local law. Judge Harlan is his brother-in-law. Sheriff Wade is on his payroll. The county surveyor... Ezra's mouth twisted. Let's just say he finds what Drummond pays him to find. So you came. Clara met his eyes. Federal authority. Railway Commission has jurisdiction over land disputes affecting rail routes. Drummond wants your land, Mrs. Henshaw. All of it. Because the Kansas and Colorado Railroad is coming through here next year, and your property sits right where they need the water station. Ezra shifted, wincing. He'll make $50,000 when he sells to the railroad. Your $240 mortgage is pocket change. Jacob whistled low. $50,000. If he can get clear title. Yet, Ezra folded the maps carefully. But if someone challenges the foreclosure with federal evidence... Outside, the sound of hooves. Multiple horses coming fast. Clara's heart stopped. She moved to the window, peered through the gap in the curtains. 3 men dismounting. Not Drummond, these were rougher types. Ranch hands or hired guns, she couldn't tell. You expecting visitors? Ezra's hand moved to his side, where a gun belt should be. No. Clara turned to the children. Ruth, Jacob, root cellar. Now. Mama. Now. They scrambled toward the back, lifting the cellar door. The hinges squeaked, then thumped shut. Ezra tried to stand, gasped, fell back. My revolver should be in the saddlebag. Clara dug through the leather, found the pistol. Heavy, cold. She'd fired Thomas's rifle for hunting, but never held a handgun. Just show it, Ezra said. Don't have to use it. The knock rattled the door, hard, impatient. Clara opened it, 6 inches, pistol behind her back. Can I help you? The lead man touched his hat. Scar ran down his left cheek, disappearing into his collar. The smell of whiskey and horse sweat rolled off him. Afternoon, ma'am. Looking for a man? Tall fellow, well-dressed, might have passed through here. Riding a bay gelding. Haven't seen anyone like that. Clara kept her voice level, channeling every bit of Thomas's steadiness. The man's eyes narrowed. He studied her face for tells, for lies. Behind him, his companions shifted, hands near their gun belts. You sure about that? Horse tracks lead right to your property. Lots of horses pass through. This is open range. Mind if we look around? I do mind. Clara pulled the pistol from behind her back, held it steady at her side. Not aimed at them, just visible. My children are inside. I don't allow strange men near them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. The scarred man's jaw tightened. For a moment, the air hung taut as a tripwire. Then he spat into the dirt, turned to his horse. You have a good day, ma'am. They rode out slow, taking their time, looking back twice. Clara shut the door, sagged against it. The pistol shook in her hand. Well done, Ezra's voice came strained. But they'll be back. I know. Clara set the gun on the table. Ruth, Jacob, you can come up. The cellar door lifted. Her children emerged, dust in their hair, fear in their eyes, trying to look like courage. Those were Drummond's men, Ezra said. He knows I'm here, or suspects it. How long before they come back with the sheriff? Clara asked. Tonight. Tomorrow. Depends how careful they want to be. Ezra looked at the maps. We need to move fast. Get this evidence to the territorial governor in Topeka, or the federal marshal. How long would that take? 3 days by fast horse? Maybe 4. You can't ride like that. Clara gestured to his wound. No. Ezra's eyes met hers, something like respect in them. But someone could ride for me. Carry my commission seal and these maps. A federal surveyor's evidence can't be ignored. Who? Ruth asked. Ezra pulled a badge from his vest pocket. Brass, eagle emblazoned, official as Sunday. Anyone I deputize as temporary survey assistant. Gives them federal authority to carry documents and testify. The weight of it settled over Clara like a wool coat in summer. Heavy, inescapable. Or, Ezra continued, voice careful, we make our stand here, force Drummond's hand, make him face the evidence publicly. At the foreclosure auction, Clara said slowly. At the foreclosure auction. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, he called. Ruth pulled the ledger book from her school bag, set it beside the maps. I can prove the mortgage fraud. He changed the interest rates illegally. And I can prove the water theft and boundary fraud. Ezra nodded. With your father's original homestead patent. It's in the family Bible. Clara moved to the shelf, pulled down the leather-bound book. Inside, pressed between Psalms and Proverbs, the patent certificate. Yellowed paper, presidential seal, signed by U.S. Grant himself. "That's your trump card," Ezra said softly. "Federal land grant supersedes any local mortgage. If you can prove your claim is original and lawful, the foreclosure is invalid." Clara stared at the document, at her father's name written in fading ink. Jacob appeared at her elbow. "There's something else, Mama. That old rock Grandpa always talked about, the one with the numbers carved in it. I think I know where it is." 3 nights later, Clara stood in the back of the church as Preacher Dalton announced the week's tithes. The building smelled of wood polish and hymnal dust, of people packed too close in Sunday clothes. Her brother sat 5 rows ahead. Thomas Brennan, named for Clara's dead husband, though he'd never lived up to the name. City clothes now, tailored coat, clean hands. He worked for Drummond's Bank as a clerk, hadn't visited the homestead in 2 years. The service ended. Clara waited by the door as the congregation filed out, folks nodding to her, but not stopping, not speaking. The same silence that had followed her for 3 weeks now. Thomas came last. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Clara, walk with me." They moved down the church steps into the yard where cottonwoods gave shade. The smell of cut grass hung in the air, sweet and temporary. "You look well," Thomas said. "Don't." Clara turned to face him. "I need to know something. Did you know about Drummond's plans?" Her brother's face went carefully blank. "I work in accounts. I see the numbers." "That's not an answer." Thomas looked away toward the road where buggies were pulling out. His jaw worked. "He plans to resell to the railroad. Your property and 6 others. Already has the contracts drawn up. $53,000 total." The number hit like a fist. "And you said nothing." "What was I supposed to say?" "He's my employer, Clara. I've got a wife, a baby coming. If I cross him—" "You let him steal from your own sister." "I didn't." Thomas stopped, started again. "It's just business. He says folks who can't manage their debts don't deserve to keep land. Is that what you tell yourself?" Her brother's face flushed. Anger, shame, both at once. "You don't know what it's like. Working for him. He owns everything, Clara. Everything. One word from him and I'd never work in this territory again. So family means nothing. That's not fair." "Fair?" Clara's voice rose. An old woman passing by turned, watched. Clara lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "He's taking my home, my children's inheritance, the land Papa died building, and you're keeping his books." Thomas grabbed her arm. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "Listen to me. He knows about the surveyor. He knows you're hiding him." Clara's blood went cold. "How?" "He has men watching your property. They saw the tracks, the blood trail. He's going to move the foreclosure up, 30 days instead of 60. Thomas's eyes darted to the church, to the road, everywhere but her face. "And he's filing papers with the territorial court, claiming you're an unfit guardian." The world tilted. "What?" "Says a woman who can't pay her debts, who harbors fugitives, who puts her children in danger. She's not capable of raising them properly. Judge Harlan will sign it. The children will be placed with a suitable family until you can demonstrate financial stability." Clara jerked her arm free. "He can't." "He can. He will." Thomas's voice cracked. "Clara, please. Take what he's offering. There's a boarding house in Topeka. He'll give you $200 to leave quietly. You and the children could start over. $200 for land worth thousands. It's more than nothing." Clara stared at her brother, really looked at him. Saw the fear there, yes, but also something worse. Resignation, the slow death of a man who'd traded his spine for security. "Get away from me." "Clara, I said get away." Thomas backed up, hands raised. "I'm trying to help." "You're trying to save yourself." Clara turned, started walking toward her wagon. Ruth and Jacob waited there, watching. "Stay away from my home, Thomas. Stay away from my children. You're not family anymore." She didn't look back. The drive home was silent. Ruth sat close, one hand on Clara's arm. Jacob stared at the horizon, jaw tight like his father's used to get when he was angry. "What did Uncle Thomas say?" Ruth finally asked. "The truth." Clara snapped the reins. "For once." At home, Ezra was up, moving slowly but steady. He'd been gaining strength each day. The wound had closed clean, no infection, Clara told him everything, about the 30-day notice, about the guardianship claim. He's cornered, Ezra said, getting desperate. He's threatening my children. Yes, Ezra's face was grim, which means we're close to something he can't afford to lose, the railroad deal, probably. If that falls through, the sound of horses cut him off. Not 3 this time. More. Clara moved to the window, 6 riders, all armed, and behind them a wagon, official territorial seal on its side. Sheriff Wade, Ezra said, looking over her shoulder. The knock came hard. Clara opened the door. Sheriff Wade stood there, star on his chest, papers in his hand. Sweat stained his shirt despite the evening cool. He smelled of tobacco and saddle leather and discomfort. Mrs. Henshaw. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I've got a warrant here for the arrest of one Ezra Cole. Assault, claim jumping, and trespassing on railroad survey land. Those are lies, Clara said. That's for a judge to decide. Wade looked past her to where Ezra stood. Mr. Cole, you'll need to come with me. On whose complaint? Ezra asked. Mr. Silas Drummond, representing the Kansas and Colorado Railroad Company. I am the railroad surveyor. Ezra's voice went cold. Federal Commission. Then you can explain that to Judge Harlan in the morning. Wade gestured to his men. Don't make this difficult. Clara stepped between them. He's injured. He can't. Ma'am, please step aside. This is my property. Wade's hand moved to his gun belt. Not drawing, just resting there. Don't make me arrest you too. Think of your children. The threat hung there, plain as day. Ezra touched Clara's shoulder. It's all right. I'll go peacefully. He met her eyes, held them. Something passed between them, understanding, plan, promise. My saddlebag. Keep it safe. They took him away in irons. Clara watched from the porch, children on either side of her, as the wagon rolled toward town. When the dust settled, she turned to Ruth and Jacob. Get the maps, get the patent, get everything. Her voice came out flat, hard. We're going to church tomorrow, Sunday service. Why? Jacob asked. Because Drummond will be there. Clara looked toward town, toward the courthouse that would hold Ezra overnight. And so will everyone else. Ruth understood first. Her eyes widened. Mama, you can't. Watch me. That night, Clara wrote by candlelight. A letter to the territorial governor. A petition to the federal marshal's office. A statement of complaint against Silas Drummond, signed and dated. If they wanted a public spectacle, she'd give them one. In the morning, she dressed in her best black dress, the one she'd worn to Thomas's funeral 3 years ago. Ruth braided her hair tight. Jacob polished his father's old boots until they shone. They walked into church 5 minutes late. Every head turned. Clara walked down the center aisle, chin up, and sat in the front pew, right across from where Drummond always sat. He stared at her. She stared back. Preacher Dalton stumbled through the opening prayer, and then, as the first hymn started, Clara stood, walked to the front of the church, turned to face the congregation. Forgive me, preacher, she said, but I need to speak. The church went silent. Preacher Dalton's mouth hung open. In the third pew, Mrs. Yates clutched her husband's arm. Drummond sat perfectly still, pocket watch dangling from his fingers. I know what you all think, Clara's voice carried to the back of the church. That I'm a poor manager, that I can't handle what my father built, what my husband died trying to save, that I deserve what's coming. Someone coughed. No one spoke. Maybe you're right. Clara pulled the mortgage papers from her reticule. These documents say I owe $240. The bank says I signed, agreeing to those terms. And maybe I did. I was grieving when Thomas died, and I signed what the banker put in front of me. Drummond's eyes narrowed. But my daughter, Clara gestured to where Ruth sat, spine straight. She's 14 years old and better at arithmetic than most men twice her age. She studied these papers, found something interesting. Ruth stood, walked to the front. She held up the ledger book Miss Hartwell had loaned her. The original mortgage was $120 at 5% simple interest. Ruth's voice didn't waver. Over 3 years, that's $18 in interest. Total owed should be $138. The bank applied compound interest, Drummond said smoothly. As is standard, compound interest requires written agreement at the time of signing. Ruth met his eyes. Kansas Territorial Banking Law, Section 42. My mother's original contract specifies simple interest only. 3 years later, Suddenly the debt is $240. The interest was changed, 3 separate times. A murmur rippled through the congregation. That's a serious accusation, Drummond said. His voice stayed calm, but something flickered behind his eyes. It's mathematics. Ruth held up her calculations. Not accusation, fact. Clara took the papers from her daughter's hands. What my daughter is saying, what the law says, is that I don't owe $240. I owe $138. In fact, I've already paid $163 over 3 years, which means the bank owes me $25. The murmur became voices, shocked, angry, confused. Furthermore, Clara pulled out the homestead patent. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. This is my father's original land grant, signed by President Grant in 1863. Federal homestead law is very clear. Original patent land cannot be foreclosed for debts incurred after the patent was issued. The land is protected. Judge Harlan stood in the back. Mrs. Henshaw, this is neither the time nor the place. Then where is the place? Clara turned to face him. Your courthouse, where you dismissed my petition without reading it? Where you signed an arrest warrant for a federal surveyor who has evidence of fraud? Careful, ma'am. The judge's voice went cold. Or what? You'll take my children? Clara's voice rose. That's the next move, isn't it? Claim I'm unfit, place them with a suitable family until I can prove financial stability. Except I can't prove that if you're foreclosing on fraudulent terms. Drummond stood slowly. His face had gone red. This is slander. It's truth. Clara looked at the congregation, at faces she'd known her whole life. And everyone in this room knows it. You've watched him do this to the Hendersons, to the Morlands, to Bill Tucker's widow last year. He forecloses, then resells to the railroad for 10 times what he paid. It's not banking, it's theft. I've conducted my business according to law, Drummond said. Each word came out clipped, controlled. If you have complaints, file them with the territorial board. I did. They're in your pocket, too. Someone gasped. Clara couldn't tell who. But here's what you don't know, Mr. Drummond. Clara pulled the last paper from her reticule. A federal railway surveyor is in custody right now because you had him arrested on false charges. Ezra Cole, licensed by the U.S. government to investigate land fraud along proposed railway routes. Drummond's jaw tightened. He has maps. Official surveys showing how Willow Creek was diverted in 1885, how boundary stones were moved, how you stole water rights from 6 families to increase the value of your own property. Clara's hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. $53,000 from the railroad. That's what you stand to make if you can get clear title to our land. These are wild accusations. They're documented facts. Clara looked at Judge Harlan. Your Honor, are you going to arrest me for speaking truth in a church, or will you finally do your job and investigate? The judge said nothing. Preacher Dalton cleared his throat. Perhaps we should... No. Mrs. Yates stood up. Her husband tried to pull her back down, but she shook him off. Let her finish. Then Miss Hartwell stood, then Doc Abernathy, then one by one, half the congregation. Drummond's face had gone from red to white. His pocket watch chimed the hour. He looked at it, at the people standing, at Clara. You'll regret this, he said quietly. I already regret staying silent so long. Drummond walked out. The church doors slammed behind him. In the silence that followed, Clara folded the papers carefully. Her hands had stopped shaking. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, preacher. She walked back to her pew, sat down. Ruth grabbed her hand, squeezed hard. Jacob leaned against her shoulder. After service, people surrounded her. Quiet words of support, apologies for their silence. Mrs. Yates pressed $5 into her hand. It's not much, but it's everything, Clara said. Doc Abernathy pulled her aside. That was brave. Stupid, but brave. He would have taken the children. He still might try. Doc's face was grim. You've embarrassed him publicly. Men like that don't forgive. I know. Clara looked toward the door. But I'm done being afraid. That evening, Thomas appeared at her door. His face was haggard, eyes red-rimmed. I came to warn you. He wouldn't come inside. Drummond's moving the foreclosure to tomorrow, emergency session. Says you're a public disturbance. Let him. Clara, I mean it. She met her brother's eyes. I'm not running. I'm not backing down. Either justice stands or it doesn't. Thomas pulled an envelope from his coat, handed it to her with shaking fingers. These are his ledgers, copies, every fraudulent foreclosure, every bribe, every forged document. I've been keeping records for 2 years, just in case. Clara stared at the envelope. Why? Because you're right. Thomas's voice broke. I traded my spine for security, but watching you in that church... He wiped his eyes. Papa would have been proud and ashamed of me. Thomas, use them. Burn him down. Her brother turned to leave. And Clara, I'm testifying, whatever it costs. After he left, Clara opened the envelope. Page after page of documented fraud. Names, dates, amounts, a pattern spanning 5 years. Ruth and Jacob stood at her shoulders reading. This is enough, Ruth whispered. This proves everything. Tomorrow, Clara said, at the foreclosure, we present it all. Jacob looked up at her. What if they don't listen? Then at least we tried. Clara folded the papers. And someone will listen eventually. Truth has a way of surviving. That night, she didn't sleep, sat at the table, organizing documents, the homestead patent, Ruth's calculations, Thomas's ledgers, everything. Just before dawn, Jacob appeared in the doorway. Mama, I know where the boundary stone is. The north field stretched empty in the pre-dawn light, wheat stubble crunching under their boots. Jacob led them to where the land rose slightly, a barely visible swell in the prairie. Grandpa used to bring me here, Jacob said, before he died, said this was the original corner marker, told me to remember where it was. Clara knelt in the dirt. Her hands scraped away loose soil, finding nothing but rocks and clay. The smell of earth filled her nose, mineral and ancient. Help me dig, she said. Ruth fetched the shovel from the wagon. They took turns, cutting into the hard ground. 6 inches down, the blade struck something solid with a sharp clang that rang across the empty field. More digging revealed granite. Not a natural stone. This one had straight edges, carved surfaces. There, Jacob pointed. Clara brushed away dirt with her bare hands. Letters and numbers emerged, cut deep into the stone. HS 1863-42, Homestead Survey 1863, claim number 42. It's real, Ruth breathed. Grandpa's original boundary marker. They dug around it, revealing the full stone. 2 feet tall, buried to half its height. It would take 3 of them to move it. We need to bring this to town, Clara said. To the foreclosure. How? Jacob asked. It must weigh 200 pounds. The wagon. We'll use rope in the pry bar. They worked in silence, the sun rising at their backs. The stone fought them, rooted deep, stubborn as the man who'd set it 25 years ago. But eventually it shifted, tilted, came free. Loading it into the wagon took all their strength. Clara's back screamed. Her hands bled from rope burn. But the stone lay in the wagon bed, solid and undeniable. As they drove back toward the homestead, Clara saw smoke. Mama! Ruth's voice went sharp with fear. The barn. Black smoke poured from the north side, flames licking at the roof. Clara whipped the horses faster. They careened into the yard, and she jumped down before the wagon fully stopped. The animals! Jacob ran toward the barn door. Stay back! Clara grabbed his shoulder. The heat hit them like a wall, the smell of burning hay choking. Inside, the milk cow bellowed in terror. Ezra's voice cut through the chaos. Here! He stood by the well, bucket in hand. When had he gotten back? His shirt was soaked, face blackened with soot. Bucket line! Now! They formed a chain, Clara at the well, pulling up water that finally miraculously flowed, Ruth running buckets to Ezra, Jacob beating at small flames with a wet blanket. The cow burst from the barn, wild-eyed, Clara's chickens scattering in panicked squawks. 20 minutes of desperate work and the fire was contained. Not out, but beaten back from spreading to the house. The barn's north wall was gone, roof sagging, but the structure held. Clara collapsed against the well, coughing. How? I posted bail this morning. Ezra set down his bucket, breathing hard. His wound had to be hurting, but his face showed nothing. Got here 10 minutes ago. Found the fire already started. Started? Ruth's eyes widened. Ezra pointed to the barn's far side. A torch lay in the dirt, still smoking. Someone wanted you to know what happens when you speak out. Clara stared at the torch. Rage built in her chest, hot and clean. They're trying to scare us. Is it working? Ezra asked quietly. She looked at her children. Soot-stained, exhausted, scared, but standing tall. At the granite stone in the wagon, proof of their rightful claim. At the barn. Damaged, but not destroyed. No. A horse approached. Not Drummond's men. This was Sheriff Wade, alone. He pulled up, looked at the burned barn, the torch, the family standing defiant in their yard. Mrs. Henshaw? He dismounted slowly. Got a complaint from Mr. Drummond. Says you and your children were trespassing on disputed land this morning, removing property markers without authorization. That's my grandfather's boundary stone, Jacob said, on our property. That's for the court to determine. Wade's hand rested on his gun belt. I'm going to have to ask you to return it to where you found it. No, Clara said. Wade's jaw tightened. Ma'am, that stone proves our property line. Proves Drummond moved the markers to steal 50 yards of our land. Clara stepped between the sheriff and the wagon. You can arrest me if you want, but I'm not putting it back. For a long moment, Wade just looked at her, then at the burned barn, at the torch lying in plain sight. You see who set this fire? He asked. Would it matter if I did? Something flickered in Wade's eyes. Shame, maybe? Or the first crack of a conscience that had been dormant too long. Probably not, he admitted. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it. He mounted his horse, turned to leave, then paused. Foreclosure's set for noon tomorrow. Courthouse steps. Emergency session. He looked back at Clara. Drummond's bringing lawyers from Topeka, the territorial land commissioner. He's making this official as he can. Good, Clara said. So are we. After Wade left, Ezra helped her nail boards over the burned section of barn. The smell of charred wood would linger for months, but the animals had shelter. You got the boundary stone, he said. That's the last piece. My brother brought ledgers last night. Documentation of every fraud Drummond's committed. Ezra's eyebrows rose. Your brother? He's testifying tomorrow. Clara hammered a nail home. Conscience found him, I suppose. Or fear. Ezra tested the board's strength. Men like Drummond don't forgive traitors. Then he'll have two of us to deal with. That evening, Clara laid everything out on the kitchen table. The homestead patent, Ruth's mortgage calculations, the survey maps Ezra had carried, Thomas's ledgers, and now the boundary stone, too heavy to bring inside, sitting in the wagon like a monument. This is everything, Ruth said, organizing the papers by category. Almost. Clara opened the family Bible, ran her fingers over the names written there, her father, her mother, her husband, her children, generations of Henshaws who'd built something on this land. What are we missing? Jacob asked. Nothing. Clara closed the Bible. I was just remembering who I'm fighting for. She looked at her children. Tomorrow, when we go to town, whatever happens, I want you to know I'm proud. Of both of you. Your father would be too. Ruth's eyes filled. We're not going to lose, Mama. No, Clara agreed. We're not. The night pressed close, thick and heavy. Clara sat alone at the table, candle burning low, staring at the papers that held her family's future. Outside, a coyote called. The sound was lonely, desperate. She knew how it felt. Her hands trembled as she picked up the homestead patent. Her father's signature, strong and clear, Robert Henshaw, 1863. He'd been 32 when he claimed this land. Younger than she was now, he'd survived Comanche raids, droughts, locusts, a war, built something from nothing, and she was about to lose it to a banker's greed. The tears came without warning, silent at first, then shaking her shoulders. 3 years of holding together, of being strong for the children, of pretending she could do this alone. It poured out now, alone in the dark. Oh, Papa, she whispered. I tried. God knows I tried. The door creaked. Ruth stood there in her nightdress, feet bare on the packed earth floor. Mama? Clara wiped her eyes quickly. You should be sleeping. So should you. Ruth came closer, her hand finding Clara's shoulder. What's wrong? What if it's not enough? The words came out broken. What if we present all this evidence tomorrow and they still take it? What if Drummond wins anyway? Ruth sat down, her young face grave. Then we go to the territorial governor, the federal marshal. We keep fighting. And if that fails, then, Ruth's voice caught. Then we tried, Mama. We stood up when everyone else sat down. Papa would say that matters. Your papa's dead. Clara regretted the words immediately. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... I know. Ruth's hand squeezed her shoulder. But he's not gone. Not really. He's in Jacob when he figures out how things work. He's in me when I do the numbers. He's in you every time you refuse to quit. Clara pulled her daughter close, breathed in the smell of her hair, lavender soap and wood smoke. I'm scared, Clara admitted, of losing you, of them taking you away. They won't. You don't know that. I know we're not giving up. Ruth pulled back, met her mother's eyes. Tomorrow, we show them who the Henshaws are. After Ruth went back to bed, Clara sat longer. The candle guttered, wax pooling. She should sleep, needed to be sharp for tomorrow, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She thought of Thomas, her husband, not her brother, and the day they'd married. How he'd promised to build her a life here. How he'd died trying to keep that promise, crushed under machinery he'd been too tired to operate safely. She thought of her father, setting that boundary stone with his own hands, carving those numbers into granite so no one could dispute what was his. She thought of her children, sleeping in the next room, trusting her to protect them. The weight of it all pressed down like a physical thing. A sound outside made her lift her head. Footsteps on the porch, careful and quiet. Clara's hand found the pistol Ezra had left on the table. She moved to the window, peered through the gap in the curtains. A figure stood at the edge of the yard, too dark to see clearly, but something about the silhouette. Clara, her brother's voice barely above a whisper. Don't shoot. It's me. She opened the door. Thomas stood there, carpetbag in hand, face haggard in the starlight. What are you doing here? Running. He looked over his shoulder. Drummond knows I took the ledgers. He sent men to my house. My wife, she got out, went to her sister's. But they're looking for me. Clara pulled him inside, barred the door. Thomas set down the bag, his hands shaking. I thought I could just give you the evidence and walk away, he said. Thought I could play both sides, but there's no middle ground with him, Lo. Either you're with him or you're an enemy. You knew that when you gave me the ledgers. I know. Thomas sank into a chair. I'm sorry, Clara, for all of it. For staying silent, for choosing comfort over family, for... His voice broke. For being too much of a coward to do the right thing until it was almost too late. Clara looked at her brother, really looked at him. Saw their father in the set of his jaw, their mother in his eyes. Saw the fear there, yes, but also something she hadn't seen in years. Resolve. You're testifying tomorrow, she said. Not a question. I am. Thomas met her eyes. And I brought something else. He opened the carpetbag, pulled out more papers. Drummond's personal correspondence, letters to the railroad officials, proof of the deal, the bribes, everything. He kept them in his office safe. I had the combination from doing his accounts. You stole from his safe? Yes, a ghost of a smile. Turns out I'm braver when I'm already burned my bridges. Clara took the letters, scanned them quickly. They were damning. Explicit, proof of criminal conspiracy. This could put him in federal prison, she said. That's the idea. Thomas stood, moved to the window. But Clara, he's not going to go quietly. Tomorrow, at that courthouse, he'll have lawyers, hired guns, everything. He'll fight dirty. So will we. Thomas turned. You've changed. I got tired of being afraid. Clara set the letters with the other documents. Or maybe I just realized that some things are worth being afraid for. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Thomas said, Papa used to say, the land remembers. He did. I think he meant it remembers who fought for it, who bled for it. Thomas looked at his hands. I haven't bled for anything in years. You're bleeding now. Clara gestured to the papers. Everything you've built with Drummond, your job, your reputation, it's gone. Good. Thomas's voice was firm. It wasn't built on anything real anyway. At dawn, they loaded the wagon, the boundary stone, the documents, everything. Ezra checked his pistol, then his survey compass. Ruth organized papers by category. Jacob double-checked the wagon wheels. Clara dressed in her black dress again, widow's weeds. She'd worn them to bury her husband. Now she'd wear them to save his legacy. Ready? Ezra asked. Clara looked at her children, her brother, the burned barn, the land stretching to the horizon. Ready. They rode toward town as the sun broke over the prairie, turning the wheat stubble gold. The courthouse steps were already crowded when they arrived. Seemed like half of Broken Spoke had turned out, some for Clara, some for the spectacle, most just to see how it would end. Drummond stood at the top of the steps, flanked by two lawyers in city suits. Their starched collars gleamed white in the morning sun. Judge Harlan sat behind a makeshift bench, gavel in hand. The auctioneer from Topeka stood ready with his ledger. This was to be official, legal, unassailable. Clara climbed down from the wagon, Ruth and Jacob flanking her. Ezra followed, his hand resting casually near his gun. Thomas came last, pale but steady. The crowd parted. Whispers followed them like wind through grass. "Mrs. Henshaw," the auctioneer's voice carried across the square. "We're ready to begin. The property known as Homestead 1863-42, 160 acres, improvements included. Opening bid set at $240 to satisfy outstanding mortgage debt. Any objections must be filed now or—" "Objection." Clara's voice cut through his speech. Judge Harlan sighed. "Mrs. Henshaw, we've been through this." "Not like this," Clara gestured to Ezra. "Your Honor, this is Ezra Cole, Federal Railway Surveyor for the Kansas and Colorado line. He has evidence of fraud." One of Drummond's lawyers stepped forward. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole was arrested 2 days ago for trespassing and assault. His testimony is—" "My charges were dropped this morning." Ezra pulled a paper from his coat. "Territorial prosecutor reviewed the evidence and dismissed the case. Insufficient grounds." He held up his brass compass. "And I have federal commission authority that supersedes local jurisdiction." The compass caught the sunlight, eagle stamp visible to everyone. Drummond's jaw tightened. His pocket watch chimed the hour. "What evidence?" Judge Harlan asked, his voice wary. Ezra unrolled the survey maps on a table someone had set up. The crowd pressed closer. "These are official territorial surveys from 1863 and 1885. They show Willow Creek's original course, right through Mrs. Henshaw's property. And they show the creek's current course, diverted north by half a mile." "Creek beds shift naturally," Drummond started. "Not in straight lines, they don't." Ezra's finger traced the diversion. "This was engineered. Dammed upstream, new channel cut, 6 homesteads lost their water supply. All of them foreclosed within 2 years. All of them purchased by your holding companies. Mr. Drummond." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," Ezra pulled out another map. "The boundary markers on Mrs. Henshaw's northern property line were moved approximately 50 yards south. The original 1863 survey shows them here. Current survey shows them here. That's 10 acres of land fraudulently transferred." "This is speculation," one of Drummond's lawyers said. "Without physical evidence—" "Jacob." Clara nodded to her son. He and Ezra went to the wagon, dragged the granite stone to the courthouse steps. It thudded down with authority that rattled the boards. The carved letters faced the crowd. HS 1863-42. "Original boundary marker," Ezra said. "Carved by Robert Henshaw in 1863, buried at the northwest corner according to territorial survey. We excavated it yesterday from its original location, which is 50 yards north of where current markers claim the property line runs." Judge Harlan leaned forward, studying the stone. His face had gone carefully neutral. "Your Honor," Ruth stepped forward, her voice clear despite her youth. "I have additional evidence regarding the mortgage terms." She laid out her calculations, explaining the interest manipulation. Her finger traced each change, each illegal adjustment. The crowd listened, silent now. "The original contract specified simple interest, Ruth concluded, but compound interest was applied 3 times without written authorization. Under territorial banking law, that's fraud. My mother doesn't owe $240. She's overpaid by $87. The bank owes her." Someone in the crowd laughed, sharp and surprised. Drummond's face had gone red. "These are the accusations of a child." "These are mathematical facts," Ruth said. "Anyone with an arithmetic book can verify them." "Your Honor," Thomas stepped forward. His voice shook but held firm. "I worked as senior clerk for Mr. Drummond's bank for 3 years. I have documentation of similar fraud committed against 11 other families." He placed the ledgers on the table. "These show a pattern. Mortgage interest changed without consent. Property markers moved after foreclosure. Water rights illegally diverted. And correspondence—" Thomas laid out the letters. "Between Mr. Drummond and Kansas and Colorado railroad officials, discussing the sale of foreclosed properties for railroad expansion. $53,000 for land acquired through fraud." Drummond's pocket watch fell from his fingers. It hit the courthouse steps with a sharp crack, glass shattering. "This is—" Drummond's lawyer tried to speak, but Judge Harlan held up his hand. "Let me see those ledgers." Thomas handed them over. The judge read, his face growing darker with each page. The crowd waited, breath held. Finally, Harlan looked up. "Mr. Drummond, these are serious allegations. Lies. All of it. But Drummond's voice had lost its certainty. My business practices are above reproach. Then explain this. Clara pulled out the final document. Her father's homestead patent signed by President Grant. Federal Land Grant, 1863. Under the Homestead Act, original patent land cannot be foreclosed for debts incurred after issuance. My father received this land free and clear from the United States government. No local mortgage supersedes that. She held it up so everyone could see the presidential seal. This foreclosure is illegal, Clara said. The mortgage is fraudulent, the property boundaries are disputed, and Mr. Drummond has committed federal crimes in pursuit of railroad money. The silence was absolute. Then, from the back of the crowd, a horse approached. The rider wore a federal marshal's badge, bright as judgment in the morning light. Marshal Cobb, he announced, dismounting. Territorial office sent me to investigate complaints of land fraud. His eyes found Drummond. Looks like I'm right on time. Drummond turned to run. His lawyers backed away, hands raised, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd had closed in, a wall of witnesses. Silas Drummond, Marshal Cobb said, hand on his gun. You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, illegal diversion of water resources, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government of lawful property. Two deputies, Clara hadn't noticed, stepped forward. They took Drummond's arms, snapped irons on his wrists. His pocket watch lay on the steps. Glass scattered, hands stopped at 10:30. Judge Harlan stood slowly. His face was ashen. This foreclosure is suspended pending investigation. Mrs. Henshaw, your property remains in your possession until these matters are resolved. Clara's knees went weak. Ruth caught her arm. Jacob pressed close. Furthermore, Harlan continued, I'm ordering a full territorial audit of all foreclosures processed through this courthouse in the past 5 years. He looked at Clara. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. You fought well, Mrs. Henshaw. Your father would be proud. The crowd erupted. People pressed forward. Doc Abernathy, Mrs. Yates, Miss Hartwell. Families. Clara had known her whole life. Hands on her shoulders, voices raised in congratulation. Through it all, Clara stood silent, watching as they led Drummond away in chains, watching as the lawyers gathered their papers and fled, watching as justice, slow and hard-won, finally arrived. Ezra's hand found hers, squeezed gently. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. Clara looked at her children, her brother, the surveyor who'd stumbled into their lives. All of us. The ride home was quiet, not the silence of fear or exhaustion, but something else. Peace, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Ruth dozed against Clara's shoulder, the tension of weeks finally releasing. Jacob sat beside Ezra, asking questions about surveying, about federal law, about how compasses always found true north. It's about balance, Ezra explained, showing him the brass instrument. No matter how you turn it, no matter what forces push against it, the needle finds its way back. Truth's like that. Takes time, but it settles where it belongs. Thomas rode behind in his own wagon, headed to his wife's sister's place. Before leaving, he'd gripped Clara's hand. Thank you, he'd said, for letting me make it right. Family, Clara had answered simply, and that was enough. At the homestead, the burned barn stood as a reminder of what they'd faced. Clara studied it in the afternoon light. They'd need to rebuild that section before winter, need money for lumber, nails, labor, but the land was theirs. The debt was settled, more than settled. The Territorial Board had already announced that Drummond's bank would be liquidating assets to compensate defrauded families. Mama, look, Jacob pointed to the well. Water flowed freely now, splashing into the trough. Within days of Drummond's arrest, Marshal Cobb had ordered the illegal dam dismantled. Willow Creek ran its original course again, feeding the aquifer beneath their land. Clara knelt by the well, cupped her hands, drank deeply. The water tasted sweet and cold, like hope made tangible. That evening, they planted the dried wheat bundle she'd kept for 3 years. Ruth dug the hole while Jacob poured water. Ezra watched from the porch, his wound still healing but color returning to his face. Why are we planting dead wheat? Jacob asked. Because your grandfather told me once that nothing's truly dead if the ground's good enough. Clara pressed seeds into the earth, covered them gently. And this ground, this land, it's worth saving. Will it grow? Ruth asked. Ruth? I don't know. Clara stood, wiping her hands on her apron. But we'll tend it, water it, give it a chance. 3 weeks later, a green shoot pushed through the soil. Then another, then a dozen. The territorial audit took 6 months. Every one of Drummond's foreclosures was reviewed. 8 were reversed outright. 3 others resulted in compensation payments. The Henderson family got their homestead back. The Moreland widow received enough money to start fresh in town. Drummond himself was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. His brother-in-law, Judge Harlan, resigned under pressure and left the territory. Sheriff Wade kept his job but walked with his head down now, knowing everyone remembered his silence. Clara used her compensation, $212 from the bank liquidation, to rebuild the barn properly, hired 2 men from town for the work, paid them fair wages. Ezra stayed on through the winter. His commission work was finished, his evidence submitted, but he didn't leave. Instead, he filed a homestead claim on the adjacent quarter section, the land Drummond had planned to acquire. "It's good surveying country," he said when Clara asked why, "and the water's reliable." They became partners officially. Henshaw and Cole Land Survey, the sign read. They helped families verify their claims, settle boundary disputes peacefully, understand their water rights. The work was steady, if not lucrative. Spring came again. The wheat fields turned green, then gold. Ruth had grown another inch, her mind still sharp as ever. She talked about studying law back east, about becoming the territory's first woman attorney. "You'll do it," Clara told her. "I believe that." Jacob built a better windmill using principles Ezra had taught him. The design was clever. It drew water even in light breeze, distributed it to 3 neighboring farms. "You've got engineering in your blood," Ezra said, watching him work. "Your papa would have loved seeing this." "Which one?" Jacob asked, then smiled. "I reckon they both would." Thomas visited monthly now, his wife expecting their first child. He'd found work at the Territorial Land Office helping process legitimate claims. The pay was less, but he slept better. On a Sunday evening in May, Clara stood at the northern boundary line. The granite stone sat where it belonged now, officially recognized by new survey maps. Beside it, a wooden marker read, "Robert Henshaw, 1863 to 1888. He built something worth fighting for." Ezra joined her, his compass in hand. The needle swung, steadied, pointed true north. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. Stood up when standing up mattered. We all did. Clara looked back toward the homestead. Smoke rose from the chimney. Through the window she could see Ruth and Jacob setting the table for supper. "Nobody fights alone. That's what I learned." "And now?" "Now we build," Clara smiled. "We plant, we grow, we keep the land honest." Ezra's hand found hers. Not a proposal, not yet. Just companionship, understanding, the beginning of something that didn't need rushing. They walked back together as the sun set, painting the prairie gold and red. The wheat rustled in the evening breeze, a sound like whispered promises. The land remembered, and so would they. Now, folks'll tell you Clara Henshaw was some kind of hero, standing up to a powerful man like Drummond, saving her farm through grit and righteousness, but if you'd asked her, she'd just shake her head at that notion. Truth is, she was scared as any of us would be. Scared of losing her home, her children, everything her father and husband had built. What made the difference wasn't courage alone. It was one simple choice. When that stranger collapsed at her well, she poured out her last water to save his life. Didn't know he was a federal surveyor. Didn't know he carried maps that would prove fraud. She just knew a man was dying, and mercy don't calculate. That one act of grace brought Ezra Cole into her life. And with him came the tools to fight back. Knowledge, authority, proof. But here's what the story really teaches. Corruption thrives when good people stay silent out of fear. The moment Doc Abernathy spoke up, then Teacher Hartwell, then even Clara's own brother, that's when the tide turned. One voice is a whisper. A community of voices is thunder that shakes courthouse steps. Last I heard, Clara and Ezra run a fine land survey business out of that homestead. Help families prove their rightful claims before the land grabbers can strike. Ruth studying law back east. Be the territory's first woman attorney, I reckon. Jacob's designed irrigation systems that bring water to half the county. And that dried wheat bundle Clara planted? It grew. Not much the first year, but it took root. Now there's a whole field there, gold in every harvest. The land remembers who fights for it, and the prairie wind still carries their names, Clara Henshaw, who chose mercy when mercy made no sense and found that truth, like a compass needle, always settles where it belongs.